themarshallman.com.
Okay, Master Yap, can we begin by discussing the mind-body integration in relation to training Gong? I mean, should we consider the mind and the body as being one, as a whole? Or are they two separate components that should be trained and treated separately?
Okay, I think as I mentioned before, the practice of Gong is actually the culmination of the three disciplines on Shaolin, which is the mind, the body, which is the physical part, and the spirit, which is the spiritual part and the philosophical part. So already as it is, Gong is the practice of mind, body, and spirit. But for the sake of this section's discussion, let's put the spirit part aside, because spirit can also be interpreted as energy, right? So, okay, let's talk about mind and body. So in Shaolin practices, that's why in the Gong practices especially, right, we have slow deterministic movement, right? These movements allow you to generate and pay attention and create awareness for what your body is doing, okay? So in itself, this could be called meditation in motion. So it's a development of the mindfulness of the body, right? And in this case, you definitely need to still the mind, because if you're thinking about all sorts of thoughts, then you will never have the ability to focus on what your body is doing or what are the movements, the minute details of the movements you're doing. So in Gong, this part of it is important, the awareness of precisely what the body is doing. And it is this awareness that starts you on the path to develop the internal structures in your body, which we'll talk about later. And this is what then allows you to generate and control the internal energies, which are then beneficial for both the health and the martial arts aspect. Now, let's bring into context, this thing about mind-body connection, right? In a lot of traditional practices like Shaolin and also yogic practices and all that, there is a wisdom about the mind-body connection. And until recently, this has not been verified by modern medical science, which has treated the mind and the body as two separate things, right? Hence, you have one branch of medicine for the body and a branch of medicine for the mind, But within the, let's say within the last 20 years, or maybe it's more like 40 years, right? When a neuroscientist began to do research on meditating Tibetan monks and so on, there's now been a more larger and larger body of scientific knowledge about the closeness, the integration between the mind and the body. Now, I'd like to mention a few people here, key researchers whose works I have read, and you can Google them. Now, one of the key things which I benefit on was to understand how the mind affects the body, and the primary body of work here is done by a chap by the name of Bessel van der Kolk. I believe he's either a psychologist or neuroscientist that did a lot of work with trauma patients, okay? Now, these are patients that have gone through trauma, maybe as a kid, or maybe things like rape victims, and especially he did a lot of work with PTSD patients. These are soldiers who returned from war, who suffered from post-traumatic stress syndrome, right? And these are sort of mental disabilities that affected how they interact with life, so they'll be on constant high anxiety, they'll be very stressed, and they get triggered by sudden noises, sudden movement, and they'll jump up and they think they're under attack. So what he found out was that people who has had trauma or stress from the trauma actually gets stored as stresses within the body itself. It's not just in the mind in terms of thoughts, but also in the body. And especially these are stored in the fascia. So parts of the body become stiff under a lot of tension, and it gives rise to aches and pains and even changes to posture. So with this, this is one part. The other part is about how exercise can affect brain chemistry. This was done by a a neuroscientist by the name of John Rady, and he conducted exercises that showed that physical exercise actually changes brain chemistry, right? So with these two facts, then we come back to the original premise of mind-body integration, you see. And Neigong is basically about that, because if you do not have a still mind, then you cannot focus and be able to be aware of your body, or even less to control it. So as they say, one of the first things we need to know about internal arts is how to be song. Song means to have a body without tension and which is in a state of relaxation. So if your mind is constantly agitated, right, and you're thinking of things, you will never be able to achieve song, you see. And without being able to achieve the state of song, that means a relaxation of the body, which also implies a relaxation of the mind, then it's going to be very difficult to embark on your journey of learning the internals. So hence, mind and body integration is very important for this.
It's interesting and really quite obvious to me that when the ancients was talking about energy pathways and how the energy moves through the body and how this internal energy is transmitted, they was basically describing the fascia. And as you mentioned in previous interviews, it's funny that now modern science is finally catching up with this, and basically they're starting to understand what the ancients knew all along.
Yeah, this is actually a very fascinating topic which I've done a fair bit of research on, and it sort of helped me understand what I knew of fascia from a traditional approach by studying what is being discovered in the new scientific approaches. So here I'll quickly run through. The first part is what exactly is fascia, right? Now, fascia is a layer, or basically it's mainly made up by collagen fibers, but it's more than that, right? But its main component is collagen fibers, and but fascia also have nerve endings. That means that it does send signals to the brain, and it can receive signals from the brain. So at this point, modern science does not know what those signals do. But anyway, if you go to a butcher shop and you look at the fresh cuts of meat, right, that hasn't been sliced up and nicely packaged, you see a white sheath like a skin, that wraps the muscles. That basically is fascia, right? So fascia wraps the muscle bundles, but only that exists throughout the body, even in the soft organs. The soft organs like the liver is held together by a network of fascia. So actually you can say fascia permeates throughout the entire body, right? It's not only existing in the muscles or where the bones and the joints are, but it is actually throughout the whole body. Now, that basically is fascia. Now, fascia has a very unique property, okay? Because this is now based on the new research. Fascia can act as a liquid, almost like a liquid, and it provides a lubrication between the muscles, so allow the muscle bundles to slide smoothly across each other without sticking and causing friction. But on the other hand, fascia can also contract slightly, not as much as muscles, definitely, and when it contracts, it can form very stiff sheets, almost like cardboard or leather, you see. So fascia has this property where it can be very fluid, or it can be almost like a solid. Okay, so it has a very changeable set of properties. Now, let's talk a bit about the history of fascia research and fascia science, right? I think the first, traditionally, most scientists and medical professionals has treated fascia as some sort of a dead tissue. It's not alive, therefore we don't have to pay any attention to it. There was not much research done on it. Now, from what I know, which is quite limited, but the earliest interest in fascia was from people who were doing massage or physiotherapy, and a German lady by the name of Ida Rolf, right, Dr. Ida Rolf, who gave rise to the massage technique called Rolfing. So she was the one who first talked about deep fascia massage treatments, right? And so that was the first interest in fascia. And also, if based on her teachings, the Rolfing techniques, one of the interesting things was that when you do deep massage therapy, you actually not only relax the fascia and therefore relax the aches and pains in the body, but in many cases it also results in emotional release. Okay, people let go of their stress. Sometimes they weep, they cry, they become very happy. So emotions are tied up with that. That means that there's some form of release. But that is one part of it, right? And then later on, a chap by the name of Tom Myers, who's also a physical therapist, he built on the work of Ida Rolf and created this technique called anatomy trains, you see. And anatomy trains took a very different view of the human body, okay? It combined the fascia, the soft tissues, meaning the fascia, the tendons and muscles. We're talking more of the physical motor parts of the body. We're not talking about the internal functions of the organs, okay? So it's more the physical motor parts. So he took into consideration how the soft tissue, the fascia, muscles and tendons played a role in the physical motor part. Now, the conventional view of anatomy in those days is that, to put it in a simple phrase, is that the soft tissue hang off the skeleton structure. So the skeleton forms the main structure and you have the soft tissue hanging under, depending on the skeleton to support it. But Tom Myers sort of turned that around to say that the soft tissues, the muscles, the tendons, the fascia actually work together with the skeleton and provide the structure for the whole human body, you see. So the soft tissues now play a more active role. And one of the way of thinking about it is to think of it as a tensegrity structure. Now, let's use the ship's mast as an example of a tensegrity structure. You have the mast, which is a rigid structure, and the mast by itself will not be able to take the load of the sail, okay, the wind blowing on the sail. So in order to strengthen the mast, you have wires, right, or cables that tie down the sail, right? They call it riggings, I think, okay, and that makes the mast, not the sail, but the mast, tie down the mast so that it makes it stronger. But a tensegrity structure like that has a very unique property. Firstly, it is not entirely rigid, right? The mast would flex and bend based on the direction of the forces and the amount of forces. And secondly, in a tensegrity structure, when you apply a load onto it, it has the ability to distribute the load equally throughout the entire structure so that not only one point takes the load, but the load is actually spread out through the structure. So if you apply that to the principle of the human body, you think of the bones as a structure, and what connects them is a combination of fascia, tendons and muscles. So we call these strings. So it's these strings that act like the guy lines that hold up the mast, and they are the guy lines that hold up your muscles, your skeletal structure, your body, and gives you the structure to be able to absorb and resist forces, and yet to be flexible and resilient, and to a certain extent also with training to redirect the forces from the point where the force is applied to other parts of the body. So if you look at it that way, then the human body becomes a tensegrity structure, and the fascia is the, together with the muscles and the tendons, play an important role in that structure.
You spoke about the fascia being the tensegrity or the biotensegrity of the body. What is the connection or importance of training Neigong and also training the fascia?
Okay, to go into that, I would like to bring up one of our Shaolin basic fundamental theories about training internals. And this is what we call the 6 levels of energy, of which the first is a physical, but the rest of the 5 are internal energies. Now, it goes like this. The first at a basic level is strength or li, in Mandarin, right? Then the next level is jing, which is, you can say, is the elastic energy. And then the third is yi, which is intention. Then fourth is qi, which is, you can say, life energy. And fifth is then sen. Sen translated roughly means spirit, but this is not like in a extra, entity, no, but rather your own human spirit, right? Your fighting spirit, your spirit to, persevere, that sort of spirit. And then lastly, the last one is something we call shi. Shi means emptiness, void. Okay, so these are the 6 levels. Just to repeat, there's a li, there's jing, there's yi, there's qi, there's shen, and then shi. Okay, so to talk about internals, we are starting at level 2, okay? But now each of these levels is actually dependent on the previous one, okay? Now let me explain why. Let's say if you're practicing internal martial arts, right? You can't just start at the Qing level if you don't have lead, you don't have basic strength. You need to be able to get into a low stance, you need to strike certain poses, you know, be able to jump and kick and things like that. So if you have no physical basic strength at all, you won't be able to do any of those movements, you see. So without being able to do that, then you won't be able to move on to Qing. And similarly, you need to establish Qing before you can talk about Yi. Although when you start training Qing, actually you do start training your Yi, and later we explain how. And then once you have your Yi, then only you work on your Qi, and once you have your Qi, then only you work on the Shen. So it is progressive, it's step by step, right? So that is our theory anyway. So okay, let's talk about the training of the fascia, right? Now, in our theory, the Qing is, you can say, generated and transmitted through the fascia. That's why there's a direct correlation between Qing and fascia. And having the awareness and the control of the Qing, of the fascia, actually results in you having to develop the awareness and control of your Qing, okay? So that's number one. Now, as you know, when you talk of fascia, we don't just mean all the fascia. We talk of specific connections of the fascia, right? As I mentioned earlier, the strings, okay, which are the connections of the fascia, the tendons and the muscles, that sort of like exists throughout the body, okay? So there are certain lines, you can call it lines of force, but we use the word strings in a more, concise manner. And it's these strings that allow you to transmit energy, let's say forces, from your feet up to your hands, or your hands down to your feet, and so on. So how do you go about creating the strings, and what are the strings, right? Now, firstly, as I mentioned earlier, the strings is not a physical structure. If you cut across, open the body, you don't see a long thing that connects your toes to your shoulders and your arms. No. So the strings are actually, you can think of it as a metaphor. It's a construct of the different parts of the body that are somehow interconnected. And how do you connect them? And this is where the E comes in, right? The E is the one that lets you have the awareness in the different parts of the body. And once you have the awareness, then you learn how to control it. So it's your E that allows you to connect the different parts which would otherwise not be connected, okay? And this is how, through the training of Neikong, you learn to develop the strings. And once you develop the strings, then you can start using it to transmit forces, and later to generate forces, okay, or energy. Yeah. So you can think of learning Neikong as, it's like you move into your old house, right? In an old house that's been abandoned for some time. So let's say you want to fix up the plumbing because the plumbing doesn't work. So the first thing you're going to do is make sure, fix up all the pipes. If the pipes are broken or bent, you want to replace it, or you unblock it. So, and then once you can unblock it, then only can the water will flow, you see. So in the training of internal energy, it's the same thing. You have to fix your pipes first, right? Before the energy can flow. So if you take that metaphor, your pipes, in this case, are your strings. They are the channels through which the internal energy would flow. And without fixing those channels, right, which are the strings, then you will not be able to realize the energy, you see, because your pipes are broken. So this is where the training of the Neikong comes in. It allows you to realize, or firstly to be aware, and then later to realize and build up your strings. And then once the strings is there, then you can channel energy through it. Now, just like in a pipe, right, you can channel water through it, you can channel oil through it, or it could be some other fluid, you see. So once you have the pipes, then you can have different, in this case, different type of fluids flowing through the pipe. And that is analogous in a sense, not exactly, but in a sense, to using the strings to channel different types of energy.
Thank you for watching this interview with myself and Master Yap Boh Heong. Now please bear in mind that this is only part 2 of this series, and there are plenty more parts to come from this interview. If you haven't already, please go to my website www.themartialman.com and create a free account so that you're notified the moment that Master Yap's online course is released. Now, myself and Master Yap are working very closely to produce a comprehensive online course on Shaolin Neigong, where Master Yap will teach all 36 sets of the Yan Cao Gong. So like I said, head over to my website, create a free account, and then you will be notified the moment that that course is made available to the public. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
themartialman.com